Hello, folks, and welcome to Ttrpg Designer Spotlight, a special program where we uplift and showcase the work of game designers, especially those of marginalized identities. And with that, I and this channel stand against genocide, ethnic cleansing, and support all the oppressed peoples of the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free Congo, free Sudan, and free Palestine. Here and irrevocably free Palestine. With that being said, everybody, I am Valiant Dorian. I use him, his pronouns. You can find me on the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure I just set you on. And I'm a TTRPG performer, GM, writer, Twitch variety streamer, and also recently game designer. And you can find me all. I already said that you can find me where. That's fine. I'm having a normal time tonight. But tonight I am so excited because I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing our amazing guest, a multi-talented designer, artist, and writer with a focus on intricate stories, complex characters, and mechanics that drive the narrative. She has worked on projects such as Encounters of the Radiant Citadel, Out of Luck, and tonight's feature, a fully funded, hitting all of our stretch goals, Kickstarter, Jukebox. Congratulations, Lila, and please introduce yourself to our amazing audience.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was such a great intro. Yeah, so my name's Lila Fujiwara. I design games. I am a project lead on the Stormlight Archive TTRPG. And yeah, those are sort of my two worlds. I do game design and I do sort of project management and project leadership. So right now I'm pointing everybody towards Jukebox, which we're going to talk a lot more about. But the other thing that I point folks towards is my newsletter, Jarvai Games Gazette, and it has tips about how to organize projects from the perspective of somebody who's me, fairly new coming into the industry, bringing in some of my background from working in tech. So that is me.
That is you. That is so cool. I can't wait to get more into all of that. And before we get right into the meat of this interview, Jukebox, for everyone in the audience, is a rules-light, no game master required role-playing game for 3 to 4 players. Over 3 acts in 4 hours, you and your friends can sing karaoke and create a musical story full of drama, passion, and spectacular showstoppers. And if you are enjoying tonight's Designer Spotlight, please consider donating. We have the Ko-Fi above, and the link is below, but there's also a goal up front. That is our tipping goal. Consider donating and leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be distributed between myself and our guest, even though the guest will protest. Use as donation point. Donate in chat to please support us. And with that, Lila, are you ready to have a chat about yourself and the glorious game Jukebox that I've had the best time reading yesterday?
Amazing. Yes, very ready. Let's go.
Let's go. Amazing. With that, let's have a chat. So, before we before we get fully started, I wanted to ask you about your journey in TTRPGs. I'm always so curious about how folks get into TTRPGs. So, in that sense, I would like to ask, how did you get into TTRPGs in the first place?
Yeah, it was actually my mom that got me into role-playing games. She played D&D in the 70s. She was she is a sci-fi fantasy nerd, and she picked up D&D and she's like, this is great. And didn't really find anybody to play it with, but introduced it to her kids. Yeah, so it's I'm playing a D&D game with my mom that I am DMing right now. So she raised me well. It's like a family game. Yeah, so great family activity. But my mom got me the books. I also didn't know anybody who played D&D, so I taught myself and then taught all my friends, and we kind of had a little nerdy, artsy D&D group all through high school, and there's tons more after that, but yeah.
Oh, that is so cute that y'all had a D&D game with your family. How long has that game been going?
This is like fairly recent. It's kind of like post-pandemic, because my brother's older, but my mom is obviously older.
Mm.
So it's a way sort of like, because he's in, Washington, they're in Houston. So it's sort of like a way to stay in touch. But it's been going on for, I think, over a year now. And we're doing Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, which is like a thing that I then wrote for a little, like some extra stuff in the DMs Guild. So, yeah.
That must be so cool to come from a background of family nerds that also enjoy tabletop role playing. How do they react to the fact that you are now also a TTRPG game designer?
So my dad like has no idea what any of this is, so he's
Mhm.
always just kind of been like confused and bemused. I think my mom is. I mean, my mom backed the Kickstarter last night and got us over the 7,500. Yeah, I was like, how did this jump up? And I'm like, oh gosh, it's.
That's so
Anyways,
cute.
so thanks, mom.
Thanks, mom.
Yeah, but yeah, so obviously supportive. Yeah, I guess well is the short.
That's
Confused for
awesome.
my dad and well for my mom.
That is so
Yeah.
adorable. And I always love hearing how folks get into TTRPGs. Because a lot of the times I do hear that a lot of the introduction, the dipping of the toes into the TTRPG space is always Dungeons and Dragons, or watching an
Yeah.
actual play for the first time, like Critical Role, and then that's when the dive into the deep end immediately begins. But the
Mhm.
transition from playing tabletop role playing games to from GMing tabletop role playing games is very different from getting into it as a designer and deciding to take on
Mhm.
a challenging task that is game design. I wanted to ask you, what got you into game design in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out a way to keep this succinct.
You don't
But
have to. It's
so
your
I've been
show.
well, I've been GMing for years, and playing for years, and I definitely like as soon as I learned about games outside of D&D, I was interested in
Mhm.
what else was out there. I think that Fiasco was probably the first kind of like, ooh, this is like a
Oh.
weird story game. I'd played. World of Darkness stuff like in high school and sort of early college, and a system
Mm.
called Nemesis, and some like Call of Cthulhu. But I think Fiasco was the first one where it was like more scene based
Mhm.
and not really a campaign that you're playing in, but kind of this like one shot thing. And I'm
Mhm.
like, huh, this is cool. And that was I lived in San Francisco at the time, and I started like a little kind of like role playing game reading group, or just like we're
Mhm.
gonna meet once a month and play weird stuff and like
That's
learn about
cool.
other games. And it was slightly because it was a bunch of people that I like very much adored, and nobody had the like time to actually be in a like repeating
Mhm.
campaign kind of thing. So I'm like, well, even if people don't have the time to be in a campaign. So anyways, start dipping my feet into that. And
Mhm.
then yeah, I think the idea of writing games or writing like adventures had always sort of been in my head, but I was like, I'm not trained to do that.
Mm.
Like, I'm working as a sort of online programming teacher, and they must have training in some capacity to be
Mm.
like writing for the D&D books or that sort of stuff. But I was curious about what the convention scene was like. So I think I started going to conventions. Uh, I spent a year going to conventions. One of the first conventions I went to was Big Bad Con.
Yes.
And like Big Bad, like it's a convention out in San Francisco, California, and it is like the games that are played there are the weird like little indie games, and there's a lot of designers that show up.
Mhm.
So I think that like playing some games with some designers and being like, oh, that's just a dude, and like
Yeah.
they brought some the games were at different like production levels and stuff, but I think seeing games in like a commercial production level
Mhm.
was like kind of the first inkling of like, oh, maybe I could do something like this. And then I took the Storytelling Collective's Write Your First Adventure course.
Yes.
And yeah, so actually I had sort of thought about writing D&D adventures and like tried to write some D&D adventures, but didn't know anything really about the DM's Guild. But I was like, oh, maybe I'll publish
Mm.
something. And then I took the Write Your First Adventure course, and that was actually I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but I had the idea for Jukebox in my head,
Oh.
but that was a like a D&D adventure writing thing. So I'm like, I'm going to take this idea that I have and I'm going to cram it into a D&D adventure. Completely did not work. And I failed to complete that course twice. And then about a year and a half ago, I quit my day job in tech, and was like, I'm going to finish this game. And that was the first copy of Jukebox that got sort of released out into the wild. And in between, like, taking the Storytelling Collective course and trying to do like a karaoke thing with D&D, and the game that I released like 3 iterations of the Storytelling Collective course later, there was a lot of like attempts at things and like false starts and stuff. So I'm happy to, and play testing, like a lot of that was with, play testing and being like, this isn't really hitting what I'm trying to get it to hit, but also it's really fun in some other capacities. So yeah,
that is such an interesting intro to because you joined Big Bad Con, a convention that a lot of folks find to be like a really, really incredible opportunity to meet with other designers, meet with other folks who are just doing incredible work in this space. I attended the one last year, and it was a phenomenal time. I had a great time. And what a jump into game design. I wanted to ask you, did you find it daunting? What challenges did you face while you were kind of learning how to write adventures and craft all these things, and then make your first game, it sounds like, in the midst of all of that?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that was so, and if anybody's like writing stuff, I think this is like a pretty common experience. So Storytelling Collective is great. They will tell you how to, what, layout programs exist out there, the general style guides for writing specifically D&D adventures, but, they can expand to other things. And I did like book layout in high school for our literary magazine, so I had like a little bit of a background and how to open up InDesign-esque. I use Affinity these days, but so that was easy. Like getting a PDF. I mean, it wasn't easy. I did spend like a year and a half or something, 2 years, rewriting the same thing, and only really had time for it when I wasn't like working a full-time job at the same time.
Yes.
But so then I made a PDF. I thought it looked pretty good. I put it up, and it, on itch and drive through, and it, got like maybe 5 of my friends bought it, and like 2 randos, and then it went off of the front page of itch into like sort of the void of itch search pages or whatever.
Gotcha.
And I realized that like there's kind of an entire other part of so yeah, I think the hard part about making games is, I mean, just making games is certainly hard, but it's getting people to play them. Like,
yes,
and play testing and stuff. I've been able to find people to like play test, but like getting people to be excited enough about your game, given all the other like TV shows and other things that they could be doing out there, enough to buy it and play it is like, yeah, I guess that's like one of the things that's very much touching me about the Kickstarter right now, because like, there's hundreds of people now are like buying a copy of my game, and that's really cool.
Yeah, there are folks out there that are here to support your game and find your game intriguing and fun to play, and they're very, very excited about that. That's very, very cool. But you also mentioned your very specific background skills about working in tech. And I wanted to ask you, how did your tech background inform maybe your game design lens in the way that you design games now?
Sure. So I want to say that I'm like slightly a recovering tech bro, and have sort of mixed feelings about, it's a weird space.
Not the tech bro in recovery.
I think that there's actually a lot of tech bros in recovery that are like in the game space, because it's one of those careers that you can make a pretty good amount of like income to support, also doing a weird indie RPGs. What was the question again? Oh, like how my experience in tech informed things? Yeah. So I mean, I think that like for the trying to make things that are fun, that is less related to anything that I picked up when I was working in tech. I think the the idea of like how to organize and plot out and plan a project and how to coordinate different people and just like, you know, the spreadsheets and sort of ways that I would how to run a retrospective, like some of the ideology behind like iterative design and playtesting is essentially like you do playtesting in tech, like you the whole thought of like having A/B tests and like minimum viable products and like getting all that stuff. It's all these like buzzwordy things. Like it's very that all is like definitely part of the startup or larger tech scene, and just something that's kind of in the water. And so the idea of playtesting something or like having a kind of quick and dirty prototype of something was I think within me a little bit more. And I think people develop things differently, but for me, I get more excited about when I see somebody actually like interacting with the thing that I made. So I can't write 200 pages, you know, without somebody interact.
Yeah, you gotta have that
so early
interaction.
versions of Jukebox, early versions of Jukebox were like just notes that I had jotted down for myself and then like you know go kind of thing. Yeah.
That is so cool because like a lot of those skills are kind of skills that a lot of indie designers kind of have to like figure out and learn on the way, and it's so interesting to have you with that lens walking into the game design space and being able to kind of like interact with the space in a different way from the outset. Which is so
Yeah, I sort of sorry.
No, I was just saying it's just so cool.
The other thing that I'm realizing now that I've said before and is very true. So my particular weird realm of tech that I was doing, I worked as a developer advocate and made like online videos teaching people how to program and wrote technical documentation. So specifically the like teaching and writing technical documentation part that had this is a thing that I've said a couple other times, but one of the early videos that I looked at was a bunch of designers talking about how they got into game design. And one of them, I believe Celeste Konowich, was like, you know, a D&D adventure is less like a novel and it's more like a piece of technical documentation. And I like clipped that because I was like, okay, this is the way that I'm going to like scheme my way into somebody hiring me or buying my stuff or something, because I've never written a novel, like I've never written a game, but I have spent like 6 years making easy to learn like technical documentation essentially. So like, you know, and a lot of that like writing the Jukebox rules document, you know, and I'm right now one of the other like smaller gigs that I have is doing developmental editing for somebody, and it's hitting a lot of the same, you know, things that sort of reviewing scripts for like teaching content and stuff did. So yeah.
That is really cool. You have a very cool background that has kind of like informed your game design. And with that, I have to ask you the question I ask all of my guests as they arrive here on Designer Spotlight. What makes a Lila core game? What are the elements that make a game that is wholly you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw this question, and I saw one of my friends, Ethan, was on here before, and he got asked this question. I was like, I don't know how I'd answer that. You know, I do want to say that like I'm a relatively new game designer, so I think I'm still feeling out like if I have a niche or something, you know, associated with me. And I was thinking back onto the things that I've made. So, you know, I think you said up top like some language that I've used before, which is like the characters having like juicy, dramatic arcs and relations to one another. Story of the game is important to me. At Big Bad Con, one of the things that like they, you know, when you're talking about more the like, they sort of, were you a POC scholar?
I was not a POC scholar, no. But I did attend the dinner. I did not. I did attend the dinner. They had extra spaces, and the networking event.
Okay. Yeah. So if you attended a networking event, you probably got, you might have got some like advice that like generally they, you sort of want to decide like, am I interested in mechanics or adventures or like narrative writing kind of stuff if you're getting into the game design thing. And I will say out of those three, I'm less interested in the narrative writing and I'm more interested in the like writing adventures and sort of like mechanical side of it, which is still very broad. But I think I really like the stuff that kind of sits at that intersection, which is sort of where Jukebox is. Like it
Yeah.
is a bunch of mechanics, but they're very tied into how are you going to have like a juicy, dramatic story that then you break out
Yes.
into song with like characters.
Mm.
And then like Out of Luck, like it's the whole thing about Out of Luck is that you're a crew of thieves. Essentially, you're doing a heist, but instead of stealing an object, you're planting an object somewhere, and
Mm.
that object is a heavily cursed object that is constantly making you have bad luck in some capacity. So there's like a
Wow.
timer going, and there's a whole table for like bad luck events and stuff that happen. Um,
Interesting.
so I I'm trying to figure out my Encounters of the Radiant Citadel entrant was like you were chasing weasels around a construction site. I don't know. Maybe hijinksy is like a thing that like I think I'm very much thinking about like having a group of people together and how are
Mm-hmm.
you going to put them in a situation that's very like has drama in it and some interesting decision making and an interesting story and maybe like some frenetic energy going on.
Dramatic hijinks and character moments is what I'm hearing, and that
Mhm.
sounds so much fun. Someone in chat just said, one of my regulars, Key, just says, "I do love putting guys in situations," and that is an incredible vibe to have in a game. That is so cool and interesting. I know this is a hard question to ask because folks have to kind of go, all right, what is the name of the thing that I do? But I like hearing what folks think their style is because I keep getting different answers from each designer. I do get different answers, which is very cool.
I've definitely heard some like I gotta clip that recording of how you described it because that was much more succinct. But like I've definitely heard people be like, I'm like a horror writer and I really like
Mm,
yeah. So I think I'm still feeling it out a little bit and I don't want
yeah,
to commit to my game design like I don't
absolutely.
know astrology side.
You're the game design astrology side. Someone should do that. That's my challenge for everyone in the community. Please go make us a game design
uh,
astrology so that we can sign up.
okay, so I want to say my friend Taylor recently made a
Like Taylor
game that has
Navarro?
Constellation of the Titan. Yeah, Taylor
Oh,
Navarro.
my
She released a
beloved,
like game jam
yes.
game. Yes, that has you making astrological signs. So look it up.
Yeah, please go check out Taylor's new game. Taylor's been putting out a bunch of
Hmm.
projects, and maybe we'll be having Taylor on here again soon. Keep eyes out, everybody. Uh, Amazing. But we're not here to talk about Taylor. We're here to talk about you, and we're here to talk about Jukebox and the origins of this game that you have, because I'm going to remind everybody of the premise once again. This is a karaoke TTRPG musical game, right? So this is a very hyper specific sort of idea that you have made manifest here. How what inspired Jukebox in the first place?
Yeah, I don't know. It was sometime pre-pandemic, maybe 2019, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to like a karaoke. It was probably 2019. I was going to like a karaoke Asian style, either
Mm-hmm.
Korean, probably Korean karaoke bar in San
Mm,
Francisco. And I think I had like just gone to, sort of my year of conventions and was going around and playing like weird little games.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, it'd be really cool to design a game where you could like rent out a karaoke room.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 to 4 hours is about how long you might like go to have a karaoke
Yeah.
party, but having where you could like play it, sort of in that
Mm-hmm.
space. So
Gotcha.
that was the first thought, and I was like, man, that's a really good idea. And then yeah, it was just a brain worm, I think, for a while. And the
Mm-hmm.
next time that I kind of put pen to paper for it was when I took the storytelling collective course. I'm like, I have this idea in my head. I'm gonna try to turn it into a D&D adventure, that you play
Mm.
while you're in a karaoke like room, basically.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So it begun as a sort of D&D specific adventure. When did the transition happen to making it its own system then?
When I playtest, well, yeah, it was a slow. Uh, it was a slow transition, and it is because one of the pieces of advice that you will get is like, for your first game or the first thing that you make, like make a D&D, make something, hack a pre-existing game, make something off of like a framework. So I started with D&D because I saw the Storytelling Collective course, and I'm like, great, this looks so cool, and I've had this idea about trying to do something with music. And so, and I'm like, I had nothing in my head about making my own game. It's like, I'm going to make a D&D adventure. I run the D&D adventure I play test it. We get through like we get through the opening where, and like half of a battle, and like they sing one song, like one of my players sings one song, and the mechanic I had was something like you get advantage on your roll, if
I see.
after singing this song, and like they sing the song and then they get advantage and they still fail, and it was like, this is totally not working. And it's clear, D&D is a fun game, but
Yes.
combat runs like a board game, and there was no way, like I could even I could tell just like the complexity match was not good. Like there was nothing about D&D that actually like supported the idea that I was trying to work with. So the next thing that I did was I tried, I was like, PBTA, I've played a lot of PBTA games. Maybe I can change this to an adventure for like not D&D. So maybe I could do, and I don't know how the designer of Dungeon World did some crappy things, but I had the Dungeon World book, up there. So I'm like, what if I tried this with like as a Dungeon World adventure, even though that's not really a thing, like, PBTA doesn't, to my knowledge, really have like a marketplace for people to sell like adventures for different like game systems.
Yeah, not off the top of my head.
Because
could I think of one?
Because the design of it is supposed to be this like more like you're not supposed to come in with a bunch of prep, and it's supposed to be a little bit more of a conversation, and there's more like player control over stuff in like PBTA. So again, play tested my like Dungeon World adventure. Again, it's like we got through a full round of combat, but it's still there was way too much rules and like complexity. I went briefly into trying to see if I could like hack something that was like Fate. If you're familiar with that.
Yep.
I went back to PBTA because I was part of the like Magpie designer community, and they're like primarily PBTA, and they had like a playtesting thing, but it was specifically for playtesting games that were PBTA games. So I tried really hard to cram my ideas for Jukebox into like a PBTA format. And that didn't work. And then like eventually, after trying to hack all these systems, I'm like, damn it, I'm just gonna have to make my own system, and it's gonna have like that really supports the singing karaoke scenes. So
yeah, wow, this game has gone through an incredible journey, but I do want to get into that for sure, about the journey that Jukebox has taken to become what it is in the present day. I want to ask you though first, why a musical and karaoke experience, actually? Like, I understand that it was inspired by the Korean karaoke bars, but why making a game about karaoke and a karaoke-themed musical? Why that design choice?
Well, so I think that I always knew that I wanted it to feel like a musical, like that that the singing was like musical numbers. And I don't remember if it was the first or the second time that I took the Storytelling Collective course, but one of the things that they tell you to do is like look at a piece of media to inspire yourself about, how to, they're like, if you're stuck, like, or look at a piece of media that you like and really tear it apart and think about how it like structurally does things. So the piece of media that I chose was the Buffy musical episode, if you're familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
I've not watched
iconic
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, not fully, but as a musical theater kid, I am aware of the Buffy musical episode. I am aware of that.
Yeah. So, I sat and I dutifully did a watch of the Buffy musical episode, and I'm like, what works about this? And one of the things that was sort of interesting, and I think did, influence Jukebox design, is a musical episode that's happening right in the middle of like a long story.
Gotcha.
And almost every single like musical number in there
Mm-hmm.
is a like dramatic irony of something that's going on in the character's head that
Yeah.
they can't say or like feel awkward about, that they're then some drama that's like internal to them and they sing
Mm-hmm.
it, and that creates more sort of dramatic irony and tension because you know the characters are like
Mm.
really struggling with something, and
Yeah.
which I think is like does happen in musicals, but it got me thinking about kind of the purpose of musical numbers and where they
Mm.
fall in musicals. And then it's very cool, like I don't know, like a lot of times in games I'm playing a character and I'm having very like intense internal thoughts about
Yeah.
what my character is thinking and feeling, and you're like kind of representing and acting those out. And I just knew it's like, and I want to create the experience where you pick the perfect song and you just go into it and it
Yeah.
like hits whatever you're trying to do in that scene. And like that's going to be a really cool thing that I've never seen in
Mm.
in a role playing game before. And I looked around to try to see what other musical games were out there because I'm like, there
Mm.
has to be a well-known game that is themed off of musicals. There are too many musical theater nerds that are like D&D people
We
for
can't
there
beat the
not to be a
allegations.
yeah.
It's true.
But like, if you think of like horror as a genre, like
Yes.
there's so many horror games. If you
Mm.
think of like sci-fi as a genre, there's so many sci-fi TTRPGs.
Mm.
So I did some looking around, and if anybody in the chat knows of any, like
Mm-hmm.
please let me know. But I did not see, at least like in 2019, 2020, any musical themed games where you also like sing songs, as part of
Yeah.
it. There's stuff that was like kind of, like might be influenced by a musical, but you don't sing during it.
Mm.
Um, and I found like Ribbon Drive was one that was suggested to me. The LARP My Jam, which I own Ribbon Drive. I've played My Jam, and then there's another one called like it's like I should have looked it up before this, but it's like shurazu. It's a weird sounding
Mm.
word where I'm pretty sure you're making sounds and stuff during it,
I
and they're
see.
all
Oh, that's
awesome. Well, I've never, yeah.
that's
So it's like for the two that I've played, they're very cool games, but they're also very much not like
not the
you're doing a
vibe.
scene and you break out into a musical number.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is a good idea. I don't know. That's more of the like brainwave of like, hey, I think this is a really good idea. I think that it's a thing that hasn't been fully explored. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that as a musical theater nerd, but as well as that I'm a Bollywood enthusiast, and I
Mm.
burden everyone around me with Bollywood songs and say, this is why this Bollywood song is representative of a moment in our campaign or a moment in our game, because these are the themes that are happening, and I 100% resonate with the idea of having a storytelling moment with your friends and yourself in a tabletop role-playing sense, and being able to have the characters break out into campy song and dance to represent the drama that's unfolding there. So I'm very, very appreciative that you made this game, because I'm like, finally I have rights to continuously burden my friends with more Bollywood, and
Yeah.
the dramatics of the Bollywood musical structure. It's so much fun. But you mentioned before that you like Jukebox has gone through many iterations, from starting out as a D&D adventure to testing out all these other hacks of all the other systems to what it is now. And I want to ask you about what has that journey been like to consistently change the different iterations of Jukebox up to this point? And were there ones
Hmm.
that you
um,
miss, maybe?
I don't think there are any that I miss.
Oh, gotcha.
But I learned stuff, I think, from every single one of them. Like at this point, I am so clear about the like three core things that
Mm-hmm.
Jukebox has to hit. And it took a while, I think, for me to understand what those three core things. And then once I had those things, when I play tested it, it was really good. It was really easy to be like, is it hitting this? Is it hitting this? Is it hitting this? So I think I won't reiterate like all of the different steps or whatever that it took, because I kind of already said those. But I'm trying to think of what I could say that I like learned from each of those steps.
Mm.
Um, oh, the dungeon world and the D&D step that it was in, it was like it is just too complicated. And if I'm going
Mm.
to hack off of a system, that system there can't be any extra crap that doesn't aid me in the thing that I'm trying to do, which is get these dramatic, like really soulful musical numbers.
Gotcha.
Because frankly, like rolling a hit and looking at your AC, like that has nothing to do with like singing a musical number. And it's, there's just a lot of yeah, and I mean that was the same thing with Dungeon World. It's just like I look at every mechanic, and it's like none of these mechanics really fit into like having some juicy, drama type stuff. The stage that it was a fate, so the stage that it was like it had some rules and things from Fate. So Fate has the idea of aspects, which are these index cards that you just like write out some aspect that you have, and then like when you're playing out the scene, you can trigger aspects in like different ways.
Yes.
So I think that kind of started getting me going on the more like free form, like having index cards. And there was a period that I was wondering, like, can you represent a character as a song list, like as a playlist? So you have a character that's a playlist, and then it was a version of the game where like it's actually hacked off of a game called not Last of Us. It's a game about disasters, a magpie game about disasters. Maybe some of the chat knows.
Nerds, pile in. Do we know? Maybe not.
It has like two people silhouettes like next to, I don't know. Somebody should Google it. It's an older magpie game. But it had a character building thing where you chose a fear that your character had, one of the other characters that they like had a secret that your character had, and it was like written on index cards. And during different scenes, you would like trigger the fear or the secret, if it came up in the story, and you'd get like some points or whatever. So I was trying to think of like, can I have something where it's like an event happens in the game and it like triggers a song being sung, and the songs are all kind of like parts of your character in some way. Anyways, this is far from where the game is like right now, but the idea of having like songs on index cards, and for it to be surprising when a song comes up, and for the surprise of the song to be like part of the joy of playing the game, like that was an element that came from that version of Jukebox. And then like the last few rounds, when it became this sort of scene-based story game, I think there were changes and iterations and stuff that I could talk about. I'll let you ask more questions, because I'm just like babbling on.
Again, it has been quite the journey to be able to like craft Jukebox from being a hack of several other games before making it your own. How did that impact the playtesting journey? Because playtesting something for a different system is inherently different to playtesting something that you've made from scratch and try to develop. How did that impact their playtesting journey?
I mean, I think playtesting, one of the things about Jukebox is I feel like I did some like different types of playtests.
Okay.
So what the most common type of playtest was I grab 4 friends and we just like play through the rules of the game. But another one of the things that I did was and this was like the version of Jukebox that eventually becomes what's out on Kickstarter today, was I jotted down some notes and I just read them to a friend that I trusted. Like we didn't play him, I just like read the rules and I'm like, does this make sense? So I think that like, if you're playtesting is very important. If you're trying to think of different ways to playtest, it doesn't always have to be like a full grab a bunch of people. Like there are sort of more micro, I guess, playtests that you can do. So one of them was just like me reading my idea to a friend and like the different rule triggers and how the game worked, and hearing if they understood, sort of what I was saying. One of the other things that I did was there's a resolution mechanic in the game, which has been fiddled with a little bit, but essentially like at different points of the game you get to decide whether the scene has gone positively or negatively for your character. This is a little bit of an older version. It's simplified a little bit more in the final version, but at this point you had at the end of each scene you would decide like, was that scene a good scene for my character or like a bad scene for my character, and you would making a deck of cards like based off of like whether things were going well for your character or poorly for your character. And I was like, I need to figure out whether, and then at the end of the whole game, you draw cards to like determine whether like things went well or things went poorly. And I was like, I need to like play test that my mechanical like idea of this is like that I'm not designing a system that where 99% of the time you always succeed or 99% of the time that you always fail. And I was like, I have somewhat of a mathy background, but I do not know how to do like the probability logic for this.
Math hard.
So I was like trying to like think about it. But then what I ended up doing though, and it was like the first time I programmed after quitting my programming job, was I wrote like a little simulation to play the game, and I ran that simulation 100 times or 1,000 times to be like, what? Yeah. So anyways, what I'm just trying to say is that if you're playtesting, I think that there's sort of different scrappy ways that you can think about playtesting that might not be, Jukebox has been playtested at cons, namely Big Bad Con. That's actually the only con that it's been playtested at, but I've taken it to cons. It's been playtested. There's one other environment that I was going to say that I did. I'm brain farting. Yeah, there's also the idea that actually, so one of my friends, I gave Jukebox to one of my friends and I said, here's the rule book, run it, and like let me know how it goes, which is another like well-known type of playtest where, one of the things that, if I'm speaking to an audience of like folks that do game design, like, one of the things that I was told to me like quite a bit is at some point, and there's a name for this particular type of playtest, but you got to do a playtest where you give the book to somebody and you don't explain the rules for them, because I am not going to be in everybody's living room like explaining the rules to them. They're just going to have this book, and you see what happens. So I did a couple that were like that. One where like literally different, like the game has been played by people where I have not been in the room multiple times. And then also I did one where I was in the room, but I'm like, I'm not going to answer any questions, just read this book that you have, kind of thing, and sat in a corner like writing notes and watching what was going on. That's a little bit about playtesting Jukebox.
That is so cool. And it's like hearing the idea of like playtesting looking like several different things, because I think that I talked about this with Aaron quite a bit, but the idea of like, playtesting terrifying, right? Like that is this sort of large and loaded sort of scenario where you have to have everything together, right? You gotta have all of your stuff together, and you gotta playtest, but it's not. It's not. You can have it in different pieces.
Yeah, and I playtested Jukebox on Aaron's server, and you only get like an hour, so we couldn't do the whole thing. And like karaoke does not work over the internet, so we all just watched a Evanescence video, and I was like only testing the world building. Yeah, so I think my kind of thought is you want to do the minimal amount of work before you can get to playtesting. So like don't write out your whole rule book, jot down and also like if you have a game, I tell my friends who are designing things, many times, like if you have a game where your end goal is this epic game where people are going to play like 60 sessions or whatever, and you're going to have all these classes, and it's going to some really big spanning game. First of all, that should not be the first game that you write. But second of all, if you are trying to develop something like that, just get a 4-hour experience, get the short one session experience good. You don't have to make 12 different classes, make 3, and just start there. Do not end up making an entire game, because with Jukebox it's like I had a lot of duds, and thank goodness that I did not write and get art for an entire rule book or something before playtesting it and realizing that it needed to be like heavily reworked. So.
What a mood of making like extremely large projects. My first game that I started developing is a large project. That is a choice.
Sorry.
That is a charge. No.
But you
It's a-okay. It's fine.
Well, but I want to say that you've released a game at this point. Like you have released smaller games while you're working on this larger
a tiny
right?
micro RPG this month as a treat.
Yeah, exactly. Like yes, like I think you will so I mean with Jukebox it's like you want to put something out or you want to play test because you got to practice doing the whole loop. You can't always just stay at the part of the loop that's like you sitting at a computer like typing things for forever. You got to practice
for sure.
Yeah, like there's a phrase that they give like kill your darlings or whatever. Like your darlings more dear to you the longer that they kind of sit within you without contact to the world is sort of my thought. So like I think that don't be precious and hold on to ideas and just keep reworking them. Like just and I don't know, maybe people are I always like give people who playtest like some food. In Jukebox's case, like you're gonna be singing karaoke, like even if this is like kind of a even if you everything just sort of brain farts in the middle, like you're gonna have some karaoke songs and like got a dinner out of it, like.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
that's immensely good. The point I was trying to make is like that idea of kind of like this huge insurmountable mountain that is your first game design project, but it doesn't have to be that, and it can be something that's creatively fulfilling. And you can have your like big idea like Jukebox, like my particular game, The Beast Within, but taking it in chunks and kind of like trusting the process of taking it in chunks, killing your darlings and things like that. It's very, very good, and I hope that the game designers in the chat are hearing this and are able to kind of give yourself some grace on that as well. Amazing. I love hearing all of the journey for Jukebox is so immensely interesting on how many iterations it's gone through. And now the current juncture of this game is now the Kickstarter. And you're now kickstarting it. Congratulations once again for successfully funding and hitting all of your stretch goals. Congratulations. But I do want to know how the Kickstarter journey looked like. There's a lot of mystery. The process of on the other side of the kickstarting of the project is very much a mystery. A lot of folks kind of just, for the most part, know you raise money goes into development, there's some manufacturing and things that happen in the background, and delays might happen, and that's about as the long and short. And delays happen. That is the long and short of it, right? We all know it. It's okay. It's a truth of the space, and that's okay. We can all hold grace and love for each other and know that happens, so that's okay. I wanted to ask you, what made you come to the decision to kickstart this project in the first place?
Yeah, so I had released, so like the advice that I generally give and sort of that I'd released games already on Itch and Drive-Thru and DM's Guild. Those are much lower barrier, I feel like, platforms to put something up. I think that like I would not encourage a first-time creator to necessarily kickstart their game. It's just like adding on extra, complexity to something that's already kind of a weird first-time thing.
Me nodding at the camera, learn from my mistakes. Yes.
So was The Beast Within, or like what was Kickstarter? Did you Kickstarter something?
It was a crowdfund on Crowdfunder because I wanted to raise funds to pay both my husband and my friend who was helping me design all of these beast animals, and I wanted to pay them very, very well. So that's the reason why I crowdfunded it on Crowdfunder. It isn't as I think the barrier of entry for like on the designer side of that crowdfunding site is lower on Crowdfunder than it is on Kickstarter. Kickstarter, I know it's a heavily involved process. So that's the reason why I did it. I'm very, very aware of why I did it. I wouldn't change anything about my choice on crowdfunding the game. I'm very excited to get this game out to everyone. But the only thing I would change is the fact that I was doing all of the thing by myself. I have a team. Have a team help you out with all the marketing and everything. Don't do that by yourself. And definitely do not do that while you're recovering from top surgery. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
do not do that.
So I mean, like the Kickstarter kind of. I think I'm in somewhat of a similar situation, but I
Mm-hmm.
might have given myself more time. It's still like freaking. I have a laundry list of like, oh, I should do like a Kickstarter. I have not even emailed my own newsletter that the fact that the Kickstarter is live. I have told them in the past, so hopefully they signed up for pre-launch emails. But
Mm.
like, there's like a bunch of tweets and things I wanted to do. So, anyways, very excited to be here talking, and it is overwhelming. Yeah, it's very hard to. I would say like doing it alone is rough. So the question was like why Kickstarter as
Yeah,
opposed to
or like
like crowdfunder or like
what made you
another.
decide to even like crowdfund or kickstart the project in
Yeah.
the first place? Because it's a big step.
So Jukebox had been released on itch, so it's like I kind
Mm.
of did the like an easy platform, sort of put it out.
Mm.
I think that I'm trying to think like, there was I did a big series on money in TTRPGs and like different places that
Mm.
you can put up your game and kind of like how the percentages that they take and how people are paid.
Mm.
That's over on the Jarvice Substack. And like looking into that, one of the clear things is that like DM's Guild, they're going to take 50% of your
Yeah.
profits. Drive through is like I think it takes 35 if you're doing non-exclusive, meaning that you can like sell it elsewhere. Itch,
Mm.
I you can keep 100% of your profits, although I think that they want to encourage you to like give a little bit like back to the platform.
Mm.
But the discoverability, like I had already experienced publishing Jukebox on Itch, like
Yes.
there was no. So the you get to keep more money if you put it on a crowdfunding
Mm.
platform generally.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, which I got some interesting advice and like was looking into crowdfunder versus Kickstarter, but
Yes.
Kickstarter is essentially like a marketing
Yeah.
thing. Like I was told, like you should think of Kickstarter as marketing for your game.
Mm.
I will be curious to look at the numbers for Jukebox, like how many came in based off
Mm.
of my own audience or like, different things versus like finding it on the Kickstarter platform. But like
Mm.
Kickstarter just has people who will, I mean, especially if you participate in something like Zine Month,
Mm-hmm.
or Tabletop Nonstop, although I kind of want to talk about why I chose Kickstarter over crowdfunder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but people were quoting that it's like 20 or 30% of your backers might come
Gotcha.
from Kickstarter, and if you're looking at like a 20
See.
or yeah, if you're looking at like a 20 or 30% boost, like that's good.
Mm.
um yeah, and I mean the other difference between me and like me now and me a year and a half ago publishing my first game is like I have more friends in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I have been working on this newsletter for like over a year, I want to say, so I have like a small following of my own for game
Mm-hmm.
design and like project management related stuff. Um, yeah, and there was some other stuff that happened there too, but the idea of putting it on Kickstarter was like I will get more money, and then this is going to be my one big like marketing push, try to get people
Mm.
to pay attention to this game thing. And I think that works better than if you do it on like itch, for example,
Gotcha. I
or
see.
drive through,
Mm.
because it's kind of like you got the stretch goal. There's this whole sort of like
Mm-hmm.
language and it is this kind of very like marketing. There's like particular days that you're supposed to launch your Kickstarter.
Yes.
There are norms around like people do a lot of thought around like what are my stretch goal levels going to be and what are my pledge tiers going to be and how am I going to do this whole thing, and it's
Yeah.
all to like do this sort of like complex marketing game to like
Mm-hmm.
get people to like all of that is like much more than your itch page with like the buy button, you know what I
Yes.
mean? And like
Absolutely.
all of that
Mm-hmm.
all of that is it's marketing in some capacity or like getting
Yeah.
people to excited and like hyped. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
So
The like Kickstarter has all of this like language surrounding it. Like most folks, even folks who are not like nerds in TTRPG space, know about Kickstarter, know about stretch goals and what stretch goals mean. They know
mhm,
about milestones, all of these like tiers of pledges, pledging
mhm.
to a Kickstarter, right? Like all of these terms are kind of like part and parcel of the experience of purchasing things on Kickstarter. But I'm curious as to, you mentioned it briefly in your explanation there about your choice between Kickstarter and using another platform like crowdfunder. What
Yeah.
informed that choice for you as a creator?
So I like one of the things I did is I went around and like I got advice and I like talked
Mm,
with people. And you know, that is one of the things that because people have been very like I sort of like I got some mentorship in the TTRPG space that
yes.
connected me to some people, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just huge because like if you have that, then somebody will give you the time of day to be able to go ask your questions about, you know, whatever
Absolutely.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So so the one thing I will say for anybody who's listening right now is I did a blog post about why I chose Kickstarter over on the Jar of Eyes Substack. So some of that's going to just be like quoting
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, talking about that, and that'll be my more thorough logic. But essentially, like this idea of Kickstarter as a marketing platform or a platform that like gets
Mm,
you more sales, that is a Kickstarter specific thing for like zines. Like
yeah.
the audience, it's like the audience is there is basically the answer. Crowdfunder, I've heard and like you have probably experienced, is a lovely platform. They, I think, are very like they're pushing hard with things like Tabletop Nonstop to get creators on their platform. One of the things that stuck out to me, I watched like a Big Bad Con video about crowdfunder, and like Kickstarter doesn't let you, and maybe this is your case, but like it doesn't let you do funding if you're in particular countries. So there
Yes.
was Armanda who's working on, who's actually a contributor for Jukebox.
Yeah.
Like I watched her in that video,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talking about she's from Argentina
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't have another option besides crowdfunder.
Yes.
So and also there was like some weird stuff with like NTFs and NFTs and Kickstarter that I think Kickstarter is like on their PR and like walked it back or whatever, but it was like a slimy thing I think that was going on with
Mm,
Kickstarter for a little
yes.
bit.
Yeah.
So like I think basically everything I just said is like the reasons not to, which is like if it's not in your country or it pisses you off enough that it's not in your country that you decide to go to another platform.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think the NFT thing is sort of blown over, but it's still a platform that like, yep.
So sorry.
No
Something's
worries.
happening in the background, and I don't know why. It's fine. Okay. Yes, you were saying.
Okay, if you,
No, no, it's fine. Don't worry
I'm
about it.
saying silly things if you need to.
No, no,
Okay.
no. You're not saying silly things. These
Um,
are insightful things.
NFTs.
NFTs,
um,
upsetting. I do remember that. I
yeah,
remember that whole debacle that
yeah,
happened. But yeah, that
yeah.
makes so much sense.
And I guess they take a little bit more in fees, I think, than crowdfunder does. So that's like
Okay.
one side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or like some of the other sites, and the other side is just like you're probably going to have like 20% more people or
Wider
even
reach.
more, you know, back
Mm.
your thing. Um, because the Indiegogo and crowdfunder just do not have a organic community that's finding your stuff at like this
Mm.
particular point in time. So like I think the only I looked at a bunch of different crowdfunders and like Forgery, which is Banana Chan's game on Indiegogo. What they'll
Yes.
say, yeah, so I have my copy of 4G. But what they'll say is if you're a creator that already has an audience,
Mm-hmm.
like and you don't need I guess you don't need another, you know,
Mm-hmm.
audience or whatever, then you can choose some of these other platforms and it, you know,
Mm.
will generally work out for you.
Yes.
You know, I don't think I could have done whatever Forgery did on Indiegogo because I do not have Banana Chan's like
Like
reach
reach. Yeah,
or
absolutely.
you know I don't have the creds of Banana Chan.
Mm.
So I, you know, my advice, I guess, is if your goal is the largest reach and to make the most money, then probably Kickstarter is generally like the vibe that I got.
Mm-hmm.
If your goal is to have the most pleasant experience, a nicer community, maybe you already have a really strong community following that you can kind of bring to a platform.
Mm-hmm.
If you're from a particular country where you can't use Kickstarter, or if Kickstarter has recently been in the news for doing something shitty, or like, you know,
Mm.
whatever, like you just don't like the company in some capacity, like then I think some of these other platforms are
Makes sense.
worth looking into.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely check out that blog post. I have a couple of links to campaigns that failed. And I think one of the things that worried me about crowdfunder is I saw campaigns that like had where the creators were not unknown. They published a few games before and stuff, and like the art seemed reasonable and like it looked good, but it just didn't get its funding. And my guess is that they just didn't have like a strong enough community, and there was nothing. So versus Kickstarter, like the campaigns that I saw fail on Kickstarter, like I could kind of tell why.
Yeah.
Like you could sort of figure out like the writing is there's some spelling errors, they don't really have like great art, or like absolute first time person, so anyways, that is my long spiel.
No, it's a long spiel, but very insightful spiel about like how a creator comes to that decision of choosing platforms. Because now, a few years ago, Kickstarter was like the main crowdfunding site other than GoFundMe, which is a different sort of platform altogether with an inherently different goal. So being able to hear like a creator's insight now that we have a plethora of different crowdfunding sources and what decisions you've made to come to that decision makes a lot of sense. And especially now with a lot of TTRPG projects requiring crowdfunding, honestly, to get off the ground.
Can I ask you a question? Did you enjoy crowdfunding on Crowdfunder?
Yes, I did. Specifically in Tabletop Nonstop, I think it was a good initiative. I think it was one of those initiatives that were lowered the barrier of entry for new designers, which I think is really cool to see, because without a campaign like that, I knew that I wouldn't have kickstarted The Beast Within. I would have probably have just quietly chipped away at it and maybe done like a Patreon sort of thing or a Ko-Fi membership thing if folks wanted to support the game. But otherwise, I wasn't planning on crowdfunding, but because they were putting out a call for designers for Tabletop Nonstop, I was able to go, well, they're already doing this, and this platform is accessible to my country. Would take my PayPal account, which with a lower barrier of entry, and also coach me and do all of the marketing as part of it without any additional burdens or charge on my end to do it. Why not, right? Like the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't get funded at this point. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it, and I worked with Leon Barilaro, who was my point person from Crowdfunder, and they made the experience so much easier for me, and I enjoyed it. I do think Crowdfunder, especially for folks who are not based in the US, who are based in like Southeast Asia, might be a viable platform for stuff like that. But again, like you said, Kickstarter has that reach, right? That 20 to 30%, which is not nothing. That's a substantial amount.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is solid. Like if you the fact that they gave you like Leon to advise you, kind of like that's a pretty, like, maybe you would be earning more money on Kickstarter, but like the fact that you got the campaign up at all and more, and you've like learned some things, like I think that this is pretty solid advice as like a newbie creator to maybe because it took a lot of work as a single person to get the like the Kickstarter up, and to be and there's like these things that feel like kind of like gotchas. I don't think we're going to get into this time, but like the whole like how do you publish your stuff, and fulfillment and shipping, that's like a whole nother like thing. So
yeah. I had an incredible, so I was supposed to meet Ashley during the POC networking of Big BadCon, but Ashley was unavailable that day, and so I spoke to Cage instead of Rage Cage Games, who spoke to me on her behalf, and I remember telling Cage, oh yeah, I'm a little like confused about how I'm gonna be doing fulfillment. I guess what I'll have to do is individually make like a little spreadsheet and then individually email everybody and figure out what everyone's pledges were, then distribute that way. And the face that Cage had as they heard me say that, they're like, no, Please email me and I will save you from this burden. There's an easier way. There's an easier way to distribute. Bless them. But yes, that is a whole sort of like barrier that you also don't get to see as the as the consumer in this particular like Kickstarter crowdfunding relationship of like, oh yeah, fulfillment is a thing. And if you're doing manufacturing is also a thing, and how you're gonna get orders and
Yeah.
shipping deadlines. My goodness. And
So, I
all the
mean,
respect for that.
the tiny thing I will say just about like the spreadsheet and stuff, my understanding, I haven't been on the other side of this, is that like one of the reasons that BackerKit is so popular is basically with Kickstarter, if you just try to do shipping through them, it'll send out, one survey to gather people's shipping addresses, and that'll come out to you in an Excel spreadsheet where if you have not made a agreement with anybody, you will be sitting in your living room, taking your zines or whatever and putting them in media mail envelopes and like looking at this spreadsheet, and people might have moved and it doesn't have an ability to like handle that. It doesn't have an ability to collect the shipping for you, which was like something that really, I think, or like it can collect shipping, but only at whatever specific point that you tell it. So if you're trying to get it to calculate shipping, like you could get the numbers wrong and then you're on the hook for like calculating it incorrectly. I'm probably goofing some of this up, but that was one of the reasons that I did different things than that. I have a fulfillment partner, basically.
And I'm happy for you that you do not have to be burdened in this way. As we wrap up this sort of section on Kickstarter, I did want to ask, what has proven the most challenging in developing this Kickstarter, and what was the most rewarding about this Kickstarter journey?
What was the most challenging? I'll say like the thing that was kind of stressing me out the most. Well, I think that the like figuring, and I'm still the shipping situation and making sure to get that right, and making sure to get rewards levels right, and some silly little things with like getting the page to look good. So
yes, I see.
I think one of the things that like I don't, again, this is my first Kickstarter, so there's probably some stuff I'm going to learn from all of this, but like I had sort of like Triangle Agency open and was looking at their beautiful Kickstarter page, and I had like these other Kickstarter pages open, and they have these beautiful, graphics and things, and like, I will say to your audience, like, I think that we're gonna have more art soon, but the only like official piece of art for Jukebox that I have is that cover piece, which is beautiful, and Leah did an amazing job. But I have been just like reusing that same piece of art with different text and like try to be super scrappy, because I don't have like 30K, 50K Kickstarters worth of like pre-made, art for the thing. And I think that was like stressing me out. So I will say that like, I don't know, like the night before the Kickstarter, I made the like header text, for each of the categories or whatever. And I took like a little bit extra time because I'm like, man, this page just doesn't have any pictures on it. So anyways, I think the most stressful part was both like sort of figuring out the fulfillment stuff. I think I had to talk to a lot of people to get like solid on how fulfillment was going to work, because I've never done fulfillment before. So like making a page where you very officially go like, this is how fulfillment is going to work. Like you don't want to get that wrong or not know how fulfillment is going to work, because that'll bite you in the butt then when you realize you have to ship all these things out and you didn't collect shipping appropriately or whatever. So that was stressful. And then there was a shorter term stress of just like being a on-call graphic designer for myself to try to get like make the page look professional, because I was like, I worked on this game so hard and I don't want it to like do shitty because my Kickstarter just like looks ugly.
The on-call like graphic designer for yourself is such a mood. Deeply resonates.
So it was rewarding. So I think the most fun, although this is also a little bit stressful, was shooting the promotional video, which so yeah, and I think it was rewarding because a bunch of friends showed up and like we got to be goofy, and then yeah, just sort of seeing that all come together, and then like very randomly, another creator like made a video the day after, like reacting to the Kickstarter and specifically the promotional video and saying like, man, this promotional video is great. And like so rarely do you get like feedback that, you know, just some ad, you know, marketing thing you put together is good. The other thing I will say, if you watch the promotional video, there is the Jukebox jingle, which is like a 5-second audio clip that some friends in a band recorded for me, like again 2 days before the Kickstarter launches or whatever. And so just some of this like hijinksy, scrappy stuff that happens right before the Kickstarter and like kind of came together. You know, and now, yeah.
And now it is funded, and you've hit all your stretch goals, and
That's fun.
we're so excited, and we still have several days for folks to be able to back its going. Please go and back Jukebox on Kickstarter right now. Use !Jukebox to get into that link. And with that, I think this is a perfect time for us to cut to break, and I want to invite everybody to get up, stretch, pet your pets, and tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Jukebox, and we're going to get into a nice deep dive on how to play the game, cool rule sets, and the thoughts and game design principles behind it. And with that, we will see you in the next 5 to 10 minutes, folks. Take care, and BRB. Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you took that break to get up, stretch, pet your pets, tell Mr. Valandor and did love them very, very much, and hydrate and do all the things to take care of yourself. And welcome back to Ttrpg Designer Spotlight. Tonight, as I've mentioned at the top of the stream, I'm interviewing the wonderful Lila, aka Jar of Eyes, aka Cereal Otter, creator of Jukebox, the musical Ttrpg. And with that, this section now is about talking all things Jukebox. We're going to do a deep dive into the Jukebox mechanics, how the game is structured, and having a lot of fun figuring out how you have lovingly crafted this game to be the way that it is. So first off, this game is premised on the fact that it is a collaborative karaoke game with your friends. And I wanted to talk with you through that choice of building a collaborative gaming experience rather than now with greater insight to the origins of Jukebox, since it was premised on D&D in its first iteration, creating a collaborative game instead and crafting it in this way.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell me a little bit more about like what your definition of a collaborative game is, but I can tell you about some of the
yeah, so because this game is premised on the fact that you as a group of friends you have a karaoke set, your karaoke set, you are building a musical together, and a lot of the aspects of gameplay within this game is premised on collaborative decision making, as well as some aspects. There's some aspects of individual decision making, especially when it comes to how scenes impact your character specifically. But a lot of the scenes are collaborative in the sense that you are making a musical together. And I wanted to ask you about how'd you come to that particular process instead of assigning someone a director role, for example, and then everyone
exactly. I totally, I mean, obviously, like D&D, you have a GM, right? So I think it's a little bit what we're talking about is this, like, GM versus GM-less kind of dichotomy, of which Jukebox, I suppose, went from having a GM to not having a GM. And again, its early origins of having a GM were because I was like writing a D&D module where that's like a thing, and then it became, you know, something else. And I think that is primarily based off of the story games that I was playing. That sort of, you know, after I got rid of like I'm writing an adventure for D&D or Dungeon World or trying to hack PBTA or whatever, I think that I'm like, what? I want something really rules light. That is heavy drama and narrative focused. Like, what are the types of games that I know that like hit that? And that goes much more into the realm of like Fiasco, which I think, you know, I mentioned up front. There's a game called Downfall. There's a Follow is a game that I'm actually not a huge fan of Follow.
Oh.
It's fine, but sort of the way that Follow is structured, though, I definitely like took some of those bits of it. Dialect is another game. I don't know. Have you played any of these?
I've
And no
heard
is
of
a
them.
fine answer.
I've heard of them, but I haven't had an opportunity to
Yeah.
play them yet. Fiasco is sitting in my USB drive, waiting for me to crack it open and read it, but I haven't had the
So,
opportunity to play
uh,
them yet.
they're all fantastic games. Follow is lovely, just in like a structuring a story. It is the most broad out of all of those. Dialect, like, just heavy recommendation across the board if you've never heard of it. It's a game where you make a new language while you are playing. You make up words, and it's
That's really cute.
it's very cool.
That's really cool.
So yeah, I think a lot of these games, like, they have a structure around scenes,
Yes.
and I think they all kind of address the question of like who is setting up the scene, who gets to make decisions in the scene, because you're breaking out of that sort of way that some folks have been trained if they're playing a GM'd game with like Dungeons and Dragons,
Yes.
and so the collaborative aspect of it, I think it is just generally hearkening to story games, like the many things that I referenced. We could talk a little bit. I think that one of the things for me as a designer is I always wanted people to have something to do,
Okay.
even if you're not like
You're not just sitting
even if you're not
there
the one
on your
singing,
yeah.
on your phone.
On your
Well, so
phone.
here's the here's actually one of the things was that when I've been in karaoke, like little karaoke rooms or something, if somebody puts on a song that like other people don't know, sometimes you'll get like people kind of zoning out or being like a little bit less like engaged because it's just like
Not familiar with the song
Bob going
and all
off
that.
there and like
Yeah.
so that was something in my mind of like, it's already kind of hard to play karaoke. Like, how do you get it so that we're all kind of like engaged, like listening to each other, even if you're not singing? Which was the impetus for some of the sort of light resolution mechanics at the end of the scene, where so when somebody sings a song, everybody else should be listening because they kind of get to make pitches for how the scene should end.
Yes.
And then the person who is singing gets to decide which of the like different directions that the story goes that they like the best, basically, or they can combine them. But that was very like that was very sort of I'm trying to say, like, purposefully done so that we wouldn't have an experience of like folks zoning out when like somebody is singing. So I think, but again, harkening on story games to sort of like taking from story games to that I've played for making sure that it's very clear like who's kind of setting up the scene and who gets to decision making in each of the scenes, because when you don't have a GM, the game kind of has to define that.
Yes, it needs to have a structure, because that's an interesting thing that you've mentioned as well as the role of the GMless games, and how in a lot of GMless games, what the game has to do is to ensure that the structure exists without the GM, because a lot of traditional TTRPG games have that storyteller, facilitator, game master, DM, whatever the name is, someone just there to make sure that everything goes as planned throughout the session, and to then and be there to adjudicate. But all of that roles are going to be taken on collaboratively in your game, because you have someone who's performing and you have folks that are pitching. And it's so interesting that one of the ways that you've surmounted that structural issue that could come up in a GMless game is by giving folks roles and jobs to do at every juncture of the game. I did want to pick up on a thing you mentioned earlier about what happens when folks are unfamiliar with the space or uncomfortable or not fully like not necessarily invested, but like not as committed necessarily to the premise and how to get them on board. You have throughout the book a newbie's welcome section where you talk about ways that new players can interact with folks who are not familiar with musicals, who don't sing, access this particular TTRPG. And I wanted to talk to you more about your process of that. Why did you feel the need to, because this is again a game that's so hyper specific. But what inspired you to make a section about that, to include these folks in?
Yeah, so like the game has some role-playing games already have a specificity that like people have to be down to
Yeah,
play role-playing games.
Yeah.
A game that like asks you to sing karaoke already has a specificity that you have to at least be like, I call it karaoke curious, but like at least interested in singing karaoke. And you know, one of the things that I definitely noticed is that the people that I say this to who are like, fuck yes, like apologies if I can't swear, like, you know, this is 100%, yeah, like fuck yes, this is 100 hitting 100% of the things that I want, and like I'm so in, and they like 100% get it. Then there is the other end of the spectrum, which is like you would have to like put a gun to my head to make me sing karaoke, which is, you know, which is totally valid.
Yes.
And also like I know that those folks are, you know, probably not in my audience. I don't really want anybody playing who's like deeply uncomfortable with one of the parts that's like, you know, definitely part of the game. And then you have folks who, you know, maybe have a role-playing background and enjoy role-playing games, but are like nervous about singing, but like it sounds fun kind of thing. You know, and those folks, I 100% want to be able to like play this game and have a good time. And if you're nervous about singing, that probably means that you're not a great singer, but you enjoy it maybe. And, you know, that starts you down the path of like, well, what could create a bad time, you know, if you're nervous about singing?
Absolutely.
A mechanic that asks all of your friends that you only do well in the game if all of your friends vote that you sung the best. Like, that is not a mechanic that would make a nervous singer, you know, feel, you know, good about singing, which is like a, you know, if not something that at one point I was like, you know, brainstorming about or whatever, was definitely something that other people have suggested before, and like is one of the first things that comes to mind. Like Karaoke Revolution, I'm pretty sure is a game, but there's video games out there and stuff that will like judge your singing, and like I don't know, sometimes, you know. So I think that's like sort of why that gamification is in people's heads. But you know, that whole chain of logic I followed is it ends up being like one of the core tenets of Jukebox is like, Jukebox is supposed to be friendly for somebody who, you know, is maybe a little bit nervous about singing. As long as they're down with the premise of like being with friends at a karaoke party, like, cool. If they absolutely don't want to be there, that's fine. But if they're, you know, interested, like, and I think the other thing is like, there's a lot of folks out there who are like hardcore, they like improvising, and they're theater kids, and they're like super into this. But a game like D&D, which requires they might be sort of curious about D&D or role-playing games in general, but sort of turned off by the heavy mechanics of you know, certain types of role-playing games. And generally, if somebody says role-playing game, like D&D is the first thing that comes to mind. So it's, you know, the number of people, even folks who like write for D&D or do stuff in the Ttrpg space that don't know much about story games, you know, is pretty big. So I think that there was also an effort. So my game like does not have very many rules. Like, one of the sort of people I imagined in my friend was my friend Charlotte, who like likes role-playing games but does not like any of the like the is mechanics, you know, and, not there for the rules. And you know, she kept saying like, make the game simpler. Like, she was very like anti having a bunch of like complicated mechanics. And you know, because I don't know. I think is one of my first games. I got like really, really fiddly with stuff about how I could like, you know, there was a version of the game where you had these little pebbles that were tracking whether you were in harmony or disharmony with your dramatic relationships with people. Like, you'd slide them around and like stuff. And like, sure, that seems kind of cool and fun, but it has absolutely nothing to do with like creating a cool karaoke scene.
Having that kind of like casual sort of like, we're a bunch of friends and we're sitting around a karaoke machine and we're here to have a good time. Like, finding harmony is not necessarily that vibe.
Or like counting how many harmony stones you have to activate your star power. Like, there was stuff like that I was doing.
So
and like,
cool.
well, it all I mean, it sounds cool, but then when you actually do it, it has a sort of mechanical dissonance to sort of play off of whatever. But it has it fights against being able to just like pour your heart out in a song if you're
Yeah.
thinking about how many star tokens you're getting or whatever.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and uh like lowering the barrier of entry on a game, especially a new type of TTRPG that's using a new system, and lowering the barrier of entry with something like that is, I think, really really important. It encourages folks to be able to engage in the game in a very very specific way. um and with that, and you're increasing accessibility in that sense to a new game like that. And in that sense, I would love to talk about, let's let the audience know a bit more about the premise of the game. So in Jukebox, you are playing as a group of friends, you got a karaoke machine, and you are working collaboratively together to craft a musical. You get a little playbill, you're able to craft a musical from start to finish with opening numbers, act 1, act 2, act 3, and with a finale at the end. So I found that so interesting that you have structured this game, this karaoke game, and the gameplay loop as a 3-act musical. What was the process and journey in crafting that specific gameplay loop?
Yeah, I mean, well, so the first thing I guess is that it is sort of like harmonious with, kind of the idea of like a theater production. But I think the larger thing though is that, again, sort of talking about some of my influences, they had these 3-act structures. So
Gotcha.
like Follow has a 3-act structure, Dialect has a 3-act structure. There was the game from Magpie that I cannot remember. I'm also pretty sure has a 3-act structure. But a lot of these scene-based games will have some way to be like, you're in this part of the story, then you're in, and something changes, and you're in this like
Gotcha.
heightened part of the story, then something changes, and now we're at the like, the shit's getting real kind of stage. And I think there could have been different ways to go about it, but again, because it fits so nicely with the sort of like theatrical theme to just be like their acts and like, let's try it this way. That was always a structure that definitely seemed to be, there was some mental calculation of like how many scenes are going to be in the act, and if a scene takes this long, then like how long is the whole game going to be, kind of thing. So and deciding what's going to happen in each act, which this is actually fairly recent in the game, but it became very crystallized as like act 1 are your character solos, act 2 is a bunch of story scenes where you get to like up the drama, introduce new stuff going on, and tell the bulk of your story, and then act 3 is when the characters that you introduced in Act 1 all get some sort of mini resolution. It might be a terrible resolution, but you get some sort of or a good resolution, but you get some sort of resolution.
Absolutely. No, that is so cool. And I think it's a great way to kind of like anchor all of the players into the moment in that sense, and be able to, again, in a GM-less game, to structure the narrative and also anchor down the gameplay loop for folks who are not facilitating the game in that sense.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool. Yes.
I'll say one more thing to that. So I think one of the things that I was thinking about in design was like narrative questions. Like, what are the narrative questions that are like driving forward the story? That again, not something that's like completely unique to me. That like comes up in like a scene playing. It comes up in media in general, right? So the it's changed names, but what it's called in the final version is the group goal. But there was always this idea that there's going to be a question that the musical is about, and it's going to be a yes or no question, and you start off by asking it, and you play through the musical, and you don't know what the answer is, and then you're building up, and then the finale is when you get to finally answer like what happens to this group of people. And then, so that's like the entire structure, but then there are these smaller loops, I guess, within that. So each character has, like, it was important for me for each character to have a character arc. So each character has a narrative question attached to them of, like, are they going to resolve their complication, or is their complication going to get the better of them? And then they each get a little mini character arc where we introduce, like, some drama going on with them, and by the time they get to the resolution scenes at the end, you get to see whether things go well or things go poorly. And then the smallest version of the narrative question is during the scenes themselves, where each scene has a question, which is answered by the song that you sing as like your climactic number. So it's kind of, and I think like story games do this, where one way to structure things, one way to have a dialogue is to have a player or a group of players asking a question, and then somebody else gets to decide what the answer to that question is, or random chance gets to decide what the answer to that question is.
Yeah, and you do that though in this game, is that in the tech rehearsal section, you have basically a situation it's like a pre-production area before the game fully starts, where there's an exploration of gaming as conversation here. And it also permeates throughout the rulebook, as you said, where you have characters with an inherent narrative question, you have a group goal, you have resolutions that tie between each narrative arc that will impact the outcome of the musical as a whole. And I wanted to ask you about the origins of the gaming as conversation. And you already said this inspired by a lot of the games that you had. But to what were the origins of that particular gaming as conversation, and what are your thoughts about having a game where conversation permeates throughout all of it, of what we all want to do collaboratively and what we want the story to look like?
I mean, I think it kind of goes back to that, how do you handle GM-less role-playing? In a GM, if you have a game where you have a GM, the GM is setting up a bunch of premises for what's happening to your characters, and the question is, what do your characters do? But when you don't have a GM, you, I think, have to figure out just different ways to handle the conversation and have questions and have things going on. I think I've said a lot of my insightful things about... I might need more... if there's a specific section of the game, I'm happy to. I'm trying to think.
This is, I'm bringing it up right now in the. Pardon me. This has opened the wrong thing. It's fine. But the aspect of gaming as conversation in tech production itself, I'm bringing it up right now. And you have a section here where you specifically talk about when you're setting out the bounds of what the story is, and you're able to, at the beginning, first talk about what this musical is about, but also creating the setting together as a party and as a group of friends, and in crafting the world that you're making, and also crafting the musical that you are all participating in, and the way the characters are going to interact with from the outset. I guess is where I want to hone the question in on.
Totally. Yeah. So I think before the 3-act structure, there's this sort of world building little part of the game that you do. Yeah. It starts off with you singing the opening number. So that gives you a little bit of inspiration for, well, first of all, you start the game by singing a karaoke song, which kind of was a really important thing. The speed at which you got to your first karaoke song was important to me. I didn't want a bunch of rules before you sing your first karaoke song. So you sing your first karaoke song, and then you build a world off of that karaoke song, was kind of the premise there. And what do you need for a world? Or what do you need kind of to set up a story? At least a story that's going to function for Jukebox.
Yeah.
We need to know where this is happening. You need a setting for that world.
Absolutely,
and then, as you hit on, there's some exercises there to get you to generate the setting off of what you just said. You're essentially in Jukebox, and this is something I found out through playtesting, you're trying to do something that's an ensemble story. You have a group of characters. Yes. I'm gonna get very rambly.
No, you're fine. And I love the ensemble bit, because I remember reading through this, and one of the parts is when you're building the ensemble, you choose a bond with each of the characters. Which, very cool to have in a TTRPGs. More TTRPGs need to have ways that in the book and in the world kind of prompt you to build connections with your other players. But I do want to bring up the fact that you have three sort of major bond groups, I suppose, of ways that you can interact with one another. And I gotta know, some of these questions are violent. I'm looking at relational bond. You have a question here that says, what personal relationship keeps this group together, which is an incredibly loaded question that is so interesting and prompts so many ideas. And I wanted to hear like your inspirations behind a lot of the questions that you got here in these sections.
Yeah, so questions are me, I guess, and trying to get like a little bit juicy and like dramatic, I guess, with asking
Yes.
things. The the framework is actually I went to a number of presentations in, I want to say like 2019, or no, it was during the pandemic, but the Magpie has like a um at least at that point in time, they were having one of their core game design or different game designers that worked for them give presentations about game design. And one of the game designers, apologies, it might have been Mark. Anyways, I don't have the names off the top of my head, but one of the game designers, one of the big like light bulb moments that I had watching that was he described a concept that he called the holding environment, which is essentially those three different categories. And it is like, I'm calling it a bond, but it's like what keeps these characters together.
Gotcha.
And it was such a light bulb for me because I was currently DMing a campaign where I'm like, I realize that my holding environment is not very strong. That's why everybody's trying to go off in like different directions right now.
Yeah.
So, so the light bulb, so it's a light bulb of like, just the concept of having like some sort of structure that's keeping you together. And then one of the things I really loved was he laid out like some different ways that you could have structures to keep folks together. So one structure, I think, is the organizational structure.
It is the organizational bond. Yes.
Yeah, like an organizational bond. So like y'all go to school together, or you have the same job, or like maybe this is probably not the like. It could be something that you haven't chosen to do. So maybe you're all in a jury, for a trial or something.
Oh my god, I don't know, sounds brilliant though. An Ace Attorney musical. I'm calling it out right now. Yeah. I'm gonna make this happen. Yeah. That
sounds like a great playset, actually. That sounds like a freaking awesome playset.
The Ace Attorney musical does actually exist. There was a group many years ago. I'm an Ace Attorney fan. I'm so sorry if this was made immediately obvious.
No, this is great.
And Ace Attorney musical does indeed exist. There's a whole soundtrack that exists out on YouTube right now. But now that you brought that up, you're all members of the jury. I'm like, this sounds like a lot of fun. Actually, that would be a really fun.
I think. Yeah, let's put a pin in that.
Yeah.
But so organizational is again like some sort of organization that's keeping you together. Yeah. Then you have environmental, which essentially means like, hey, you can't leave the group because if you leave the group, the environment's gonna kill you, or like, there is some just like, or you're in a room with walls around you. There's something about the environment that like keeps you, all together. So I think I have spaceship in there as one of them because like can't leave the spaceship, or that's for most, unless you're like some weird alien. Yeah. But like, or having a desolate wasteland where it's like you got to stick together because if you don't, like, you're gonna run out of food or something. So something about the dangers or constraints of the environment, all keep you together. And then the last one is the relational one, which I think is like a little bit harder, but it's basically like your relationships between each other. They're not as organized necessarily as like as the organizational category. It is more like you have you've shared experiences, or again, relationships with one another, friendships, something that like, keep you together and entangle you in a particular way where you can't draw apart. So this was actually a later addition to Jukebox because I realized that I was doing these playtests and like 70% of the time they'd go freaking awesome. Like everything would be, great. Yeah. And then 30% of the time things would not, go well. And I'm going like, well, so the reason that it doesn't go well is because I didn't have this bond setting like category of
Okay.
things. And so sometimes players would just naturally pick characters that like had reasons to be in scenes with one another and like had
Mm,
reasons to all kind of be invested in the same thing. And then sometimes players would get really excited, but they pick characters that are maybe like sort of antagonists to one another, or could kind of
mm,
just be like, fuck off, I don't like you, and like go off and be in like another part of the musical. And
mm.
that does not work well for the short amount of time where you really like need everybody
Yeah.
together. So I went back, oh, light bulb moment, like there isn't there isn't something holding these characters together. And I'll just say for if there are folks out there who are game designers, I think like, what is your group's bond?
Yeah.
Both if you're talking about writing adventures or being a GM or designing games,
Mm-hmm.
in all of those capacities,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a game you're playing with a group of players, like answering the question of like, what is keeping all these characters from not just like going off into different corners of
Interesting.
whatever,
Yeah.
is like I think a very important question to ask.
That's so interesting. It's one of the questions I did want to ask you because we've talked about it throughout here, kind of like the like providing guidelines, providing structure in a game that is GMless. And I wanted to ask you, especially with creating groups, like finding answers to those kind of questions. Because traditionally in
Mhm.
TTRPGs, we have, all right, you make your characters, we sit down for session 0, we're a party now, and we'll weave a story together with whatever characters everyone's got.
Mhm.
We meet in a tavern, the classic meme, right?
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you about your perspective as a game designer of how do you find that balance between prescriptive guidelines and making that open creative space and choice for characters to be able to go,
Mhm.
this is who I am as a person. And I also want to add an additional pin to that, being, do you believe that the task of creating those sort of avenues of the discussions of bonds needs to be something a designer needs to include in their games and providing that structure for folks who are about to play their game?
Yeah. So like, oh man. Well,
I know I
so
threw you a doozy over there. I was just
no,
like,
no, no,
this is
no, that's
interesting.
great. Like, so if you want to talk about like Lila Core TM games, they are games where the characters have like a reason to be together, I think.
Mm,
Like I think a lot of us learn how to do this with D&D is a game that does not have a strong holding environment. It's like a light
yeah.
bulb moment from watching this other game
Yeah,
designer
yeah, yeah,
speak.
yeah.
But
For
like
sure.
it is it's a game that it doesn't give you the best it gives you is you all need money and you met at a bar. And
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
for some groups that are like super into all of the relationships and getting deep into
Mm,
backstory or whatever, they will make their own reasons for why they care about each other and how they sort of relate and everything.
yeah.
um but there will also be groups that like you're just not on the same page about that, or you don't know how to do that, and it's how you start getting like murder hobos and people who are like less
Yeah.
invested in the world, or like another person just goes off to have an adventure on their own that nobody else is invested in.
Yes.
So like or there's some games that are literally just you're a bunch of peasants going through like where the backstory doesn't matter as
Yeah.
much and you're not as worried about I don't know, like,
Yeah.
so I am more interested in games that are exploring some
Mm,
interesting like character
mhm.
dynamic and set up some interesting motivations between the characters and like why they are together in a group and rely
Yeah.
on each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think every game, yeah, I don't think every game has to have that. As far as like, yeah, but I just think if I am playing a game, even if the game doesn't prescribe that, like I as a player kind of want that. I want to
Mm,
know why we're all together,
yes.
and I will like even when I was playing D&D, I would come up with reasons as to like why we're all
We're all here and hanging out.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
all here and in it, and why we care about each other, and that's like a much more satisfying play experience for me.
Hmm.
Now, with a one shot, like a
Yes.
game that you're supposed to get through in 4 hours, you don't have time to dick around and like be
It's true.
unclear about why we're all I
Yeah.
mean, you might think about some like sort of poorly run first games of sessions of D&D, like you might have a session where it's kind of just like you're dicking around and you don't really know what's going
Oh,
on or whatever. But
yeah.
you can't have that for if you're doing a one shot, musical
Yeah,
RPG.
the flashbacks are
So
happening.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, there it is. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And what do you think then on when crafting a game, like a brand new game, the brand new system? Is it
Mhm.
incumbent on the designer to make that kind of to craft these prompts and make these set the scene almost with bonds between characters to aid the players, or how do we find the balance between
Yeah.
all of that?
So my answer would probably be something along the lines of playtesting. And what I mean from that is like you should have some understanding of how to create like an enjoyable play experience for your players. And
Yes.
I would posit,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what type of game that you're trying to do, I would
Mm-hmm.
posit that a more enjoyable play experience is one where the characters know like what they're doing, why they're
Mm,
together, and they're invested in each other.
yes.
You might be writing a game that like for whatever reason something funky is going on and that's like not an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's sort of an example. Like um oh gosh, The Quiet Year, which probably
Mm.
sort of fits into this, but like it's a map making game or
Yes, I
whatever.
remember.
So
Yeah.
that might kind of go outside of, I mean, it does have sort of characters or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
it is talking about a community, but I'm sure there's some games that you could play that would technically be considered role playing games that
Mm.
like don't even have characters. So like they might go outside of this, sort
Mm.
of thing. Um, but I guess for a game that has a bunch of characters,
Mm-hmm.
if the if you know that the fun version of your game
Mm-hmm.
is the version of your game where all the characters are bonded in some way or have
Yeah.
a reason to be together, then it is incumbent on you as a designer to create some sort of mechanic to make that happen. Um,
Very well said.
and, yeah. But like I'm so interested as to what cool relational building mechanics or things that people will come up with, because I will say that the like
Mm.
asking relationship questions is like that's one that's been done a lot,
Yeah.
so I think it's a solid one. Obviously
Yeah.
I'm like using it to some extent for Jukebox for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But like I'm sure there's other ways that you could set up mechanics that would still at the end of it leave you with all of the players understanding what they're
Mm.
like, why they need to be together, or just in a situation where you're not arguing about why you need to leave or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, no, that makes
yeah.
a lot of sense and very, very well said. I definitely agree with you that, at least for me, Valiant core games is when I get to equally obsess over my friends' floorboards as much as I am obsessed with mine,
Mhm.
and being incredibly engaged with all their stories, my story, and the story that we're all weaving together in unison. I think is one of my favorite things about gameplay and about playing tabletop role playing games.
Yeah,
And no,
definitely.
that's a fantastic answer. I love that. And speaking of like bonds and conflict and things like that, throughout the game we have the three acts. The conflict really comes in Act Two, where the story scenes begin. That's where the conflict and complication elements of the game are involved. Players have scene questions that they kind of begin showing the narrative conflict and have to begin to not necessarily answer all of it, but propel the questions forward, leading
Mhm.
into the resolution scenes. And in this game, we have two stages of resolution. You have Act 3 of the resolution scenes and the finale. And
Mhm.
the Act 3 is where the falling action happens. And you've chosen playing cards. Playing cards as the mechanic to help folks decide the outcome of this game by splitting it between red and black cards. Red being joyous, black being not the opposite of joy,
Patrick.
tragic. There we go. I was like, the
Yeah.
word is at the tip of my tongue. And tragic endings. I wanted to ask you what was the thought behind choosing playing cards in particular rather than a dice roll,
Mhm.
for example?
Yeah, totally. Well, so you know what I said up front about like I'm trying to create a game that you don't need a heavy background in like role playing games
Mm,
to be able to pick up or like that's not a it can certainly help you and you'll have fun if you do, but
mm,
it's not a prerequisite to like be able to enjoy Jukebox. Like you could
yeah.
have somebody that's just like a musical theater nerd who's been like sort of role-playing game curious, and they can pick up Jukebox and play it with their friends, and they'll know what's going on having never played like D&D before. That group of people will have a deck of cards around. They might not have a D8.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the, or D20 or whatever. They might have D6s, and so I think one version was kind of using dice. This mechanic has morphed a lot, but it's a resolution mechanic, and the core of it was based off of Follow's resolution mechanic, where you have a bag of stones, and they're white stones and black stones.
Oh, that's cool.
It's kind of
that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But Val, who has a bag of stones around?
I know, you're gonna manufacture a bag of stones for us.
Yeah, I don't need to manufacture a bag of stones. A bag of stones has nothing to do with musicals. Like, and if I wanted to manufacture something, I think like making cards or whatever.
Special Jukebox cards. I buy it.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Yeah, this is Jukebox like B3 or so. I don't know if we keep hitting stretch goals, but. So a deck of playing cards is something that everybody has around, and it has the same thing where you can have two colors. So that was kind of my the version of the mechanic as it exists today was the version where I was like, how can I make this the smallest, like least obtrusive thing? Because it like earlier versions of this infected, it's not the right word, but just like permeated the game more, and people had all these decks of cards, and they were getting confused about when to take cards, and like
I see.
So it's actually in the final version of the game where you only really interact with the cards when at the exact moment that you're like having to figure out what the resolution is.
Yeah, and I loved it when it comes up, because it reminds me a lot of playing board games with my friends, like playing tabletop games. I would argue that playing TTRPGs and playing board games for me are like inherently different experiences, and the resolution mechanics made me feel like the fun elements of like playing a board game where we get to certain stages of a board game, and everyone and one part of the ending sequences, which is in the finale. So there's two separate decks that are happening. You have the resolution deck of Act 3, and you have the finale deck of the end of the game, where folks secretly decide on how the scenes have impacted their character and how they believe the story has panned out in their perspective, and choose a card that they feel resonates with that. So whether that is red or black, joyous or tragic. Which is a very, very board gamey sort of like element there. Was that inspired by a board game? Or was it just kind of a thing that happened?
So I think it's like a little bit of like secret role. Do you know like Werewolf or
yeah, I love secret role games.
Yeah.
My brother and I are not allowed to be in the same team when we play those games.
So I will get rid of some of the movie magic and reveal that Val did share these questions in advance, and I was like sort of thinking about this. If I make another game, I'm really actually I will make another game, but one of my thoughts is like try to do some sort of secret role game, but that also is a role playing game in some capacity, and like seeing out Gimmer's. That's not really how any of this ended up in the resolution mechanic. So for my resolution mechanic, I knew. So I personally enjoy. I do not enjoy games where there's like no randomization, if that makes sense. There's something about like rolling a die or not knowing what's going to happen that like is very exciting to me and like creativity inducing. So for these big questions, I knew that I didn't want it to be like either me, Lila, I just get to say what happens to my character, or even that I turn to Val and I say, Val, tell me what happens to my character. I knew I wanted some bit of like randomness to it. Gotcha. So that was like thing one is like, I want some excitement from randomness. But thing two, which is true for most games, is like, I want some way that the players can feel like they can control that randomness, or that they've had some sort of impact on, the direction that things can go. Gotcha. So, and I did a bunch of different playtesting and different versions of this. And, it's why one of the things about playtesting is like, hopefully you can get it really clear, like, what are you trying to do? And it's like, That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that there's some randomness, and I'm trying to make sure that there's some randomness, so it's like an exciting, what's going to happen kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm also trying to make sure that it's not just a completely random, like your choices matter. And so at the point of the game with the finale,
yes,
there's a thing that can happen. So the finale deck is made up of each of the characters draw 2 cards from this like randomized deck that's made beautifully, and we'll talk about that. But they draw 2 cards to figure out how their personal stories ended.
Yes.
And those cards can be red and red, which means that it was a happy ending, black and black, which means it was a sad ending, or a mix, which means that it's kind of like a, some good, some bad. But then you take those 2 cards, and that's what makes up the final deck that resolves the whole musical, which like I thought was whatever. This is me tooting my own horn, but is a thing that I wanted to keep because I just thought it was like cool that the sort of fates of each of the characters combine, and that's like what makes up the final fate of the musical.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love
but the
that.
thing about that,
yeah.
The thing about that is that there's a version of the world where everybody draws red cards or everybody draws black cards. And I think this actually happened in one of my games where basically they made the finale deck and it was filled with like red cards. So that's not a very exciting finale if you just know that it's all red cards, or you know that it's all black cards. Yeah, or like you'll shuffle up all your red cards, but it's not that like you've just kind of like goofed up your big climactic card draw because random chance had it be that like all the people's all of your character resolutions were red cards, and so that makes up the final deck, which is now all red cards. And if you get rid of the mechanic that we're talking about and you just draw from that deck, there's no surprise, right?
Yes.
So the add a card mechanic was both just so you could get a little bit more spice in there, like secretly add a card mechanic was both so you could get a little bit more spice in there, and so that you maintained the like I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the game in the situation where it was a mono-colored deck of cards. And also like it kind of reinforces the like you have a little bit of control over what's going to happen. So even if you got really unlucky and you drew like 7 black cards and then like 1 red card is like your final deck, if all the players want it to end happy, like they have a little bit of influence over that.
No, I truly love that. It's the finale mechanic of like secretly deciding was probably my favorite mechanic as I was like reading through it. And I do want to like highlight the fact that you have that mechanic ensures that the decisions that the players make is indeed impactful, because it directly impacts like the resolution of the game. But I do want to talk about though something that you brought up about the fact that where's the spice in an all one color deck? And I want to talk about some of the endings that you have here where you include a gradient of outcomes that is, red, red, black, black, and then red, black. And I wanted to ask you about that choice to not shy away from complicated, maybe murky endings in a musical TTRPG that's being crafted by your players.
So I think that the most like complicated ending is possibly drawing double black. One of Jen, who did design consult on this, was like Lila, because I don't. This is bad. I should look at what's in there now, but I know that the previous version was basically like, this means that your character dies or that you've betrayed the team, or it's like it's very bad. And she was like, do you want it to get that dark? And so but I mean, there are musicals that are that get very tragic, and I wanted like Les Mis, not a super happy time. So I think it was definitely a design decision to always have tragedy be a thing that could happen. Early on in your musical, you set a tone and you do a little bit of like discussion about, what are we trying to do here? And so there are exercises to make sure that the players are kind of on the same page, so you don't end up with one person doing Les Mis and everybody else doing Avenue Q. Yep,
that'd be important.
But yeah, I think tragedy is juicy.
Tragedy is juicy. No, I love that because we do have plays like that, and we also do have plays that like Chekhov's plays where you have this kind of like, okay, so that just happened and we kind of just have to sit in the unsettled endings of it all, and lean into the drama of that as we get into the final act of the storyline. That is very, very cool. Are you a happy endings person, or are you a tragic endings person? I'm curious.
I think I'm mixed.
You're a mix. You want a bit of joy
Yeah.
and tragedy at
Well,
the end.
bittersweet. Yeah.
Bittersweet. I'm going to follow that up with, what is your favorite musical?
Oh my gosh, I should have come into this with what is my favorite musical.
I'm surprised you haven't thought of it.
Yeah, no, because I think I also remember this on the list of cards, or list of questions. I'm a sucker for Wicked. I like Wicked.
I did get to see Wicked in person for the first time in London, on the West End, last year. That was fun. I do like Wicked.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
I think it was one of the first shows that I saw live. I was in high school. I'm probably dating myself. I feel like when it was big and sort of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So all of my theater nerd friends were like singing it in chorus and like, yeah.
That's so cute. Oh, that's awesome. With that, we have done our deep dive into Jukebox. Folks, please go and check out Jukebox, and we're opening stuff up for Q&A. I do not want the Q&A to go on for a little too long, because time has already gone away from us a little bit, but that is a-okay. We do have a couple of questions we did get from the audience earlier on. If folks want to send your questions, throw them into chat, and I'll try to snatch them up for Lila over here. So the first question we got is, Lila, do you find that writing for games and designing TTRPGs is a worthwhile thing to pursue? I've been thinking about diving into making games and designing worlds, but I'm nervous about it. That's one of the questions we received.
Yes, I mean, I totally think it's a worthwhile thing to pursue.
Yeah.
What will I say about that? I will say that, like, I think that there's a difference between, so gaming, designing games is interesting in that it is a weirdly, like, partially hobbyist and somewhat professional industry, but the reason that it's hard to have a lot of professionals is because the pay is so bad. Like, that's like a very truthful, I'm speaking as somebody coming from tech. So, one of the realities that I say is that the majority of people that I see, doing good work in the space and able to put stuff in the space, they either have a day job, they are supported in some other way, like they have a partner or family or something that, can support them. So for me, it's like I have a nest egg from working in tech for a number of years that is like supporting stuff. And after a year and a half of hustling, I am maybe getting to an extent where I will be making like minimum wage kind of thing. Yeah. So I know this is not a very inspiring thing, but I think that that's like, and then there is a small group of extremely talented freelancers that are definitely not like millionaires that are, making it work and, working very hard. A lot of them burn out. And then there are a small group of folks that, are working at the Wizards of the Coast or like, Critical Role and like some of these, bigger companies that are, sort of financially salient enough to have like full-time game designers. So anyways, I went to one end of like a thing that wasn't part of that question, which is just like, if that question is, should I quit my job and become a game designer, which is a thing that I've been asking myself and then did-ish, or trying to do. That's kind of complicated. But like, should I make stuff and put it in the world? And like, can I make stuff and put it in the world? Like, absolutely yes. Like, you absolutely can. My biggest tip for you is start small. Like, do something the entire way through. Like, Valiant, you were talking about doing like the 24-word game jam.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I did
like
do a 24-word game jam. It is fun. Y'all should do it. Y'all should do a limited game jam.
Yeah.
Limit yourself.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
yeah, limits breed creativity. They also breed actually like, finishing something and getting something out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always do, if you have your 10-part campaign or something that you're
Mm,
super excited about writing the adventure for, you can always do episode
yeah.
1. Like you're gonna need it anyway, so like just do it and put it out into the world.
I love that. Like, hey, I know you want to do this big thing. How about episode one? Let's just do episode one and
Yeah.
get that out into the world. And I do want to co-sign what you just said there, Lila, of the idea of finishing something and allowing yourself that grace for finishing something and doing something small and finishing it, but also on the idea of your creativity and creative ventures are valuable in of itself without necessarily the monetary backing. It's good to be paid, and I want everybody in the world to be paid for their labor and their work. Um, but in the sense of you want to make games, you want to design worlds, please do it because
Mhm.
artistic expression is a pursuit that is worthy in of itself, and you should just do it in because that's good and fun. Amazing. That's a great answer, Lila. The next question we have is, do you have a preference? Do you prefer games with a DM or games without a DM?
Um, I'm gonna say no.
Ooh,
Is that allowed?
I will ask you a
Is that
follow up
too milk
question.
toast?
I'm gonna ask you a follow up question. Why? Please elaborate.
Okay, so I think actually where my brain goes is the games that I've played without. I do not think I've ever played a campaign, like
Mm-hmm.
multiple sessions of a game without a GM. So that might change my opinion. Like
Gotcha.
potentially, playing multiple sessions of. I actually don't. If people are in the chat, like let us know if there's a cool game that doesn't have a GM that's like a campaign play thing.
Mm,
But I have had some extremely lovely experiences, and I
mm-hmm.
obviously just wrote a game which you should totally buy and like check out and all this
Yes.
stuff, which is a GM-less game. And I think that one shot, single experience GM-less games are like, if they really know what they are in their
Mm-hmm.
heart of hearts and are trying to hit a particular experience, can be like very cool, lovely things.
Yeah.
There's a game called The Zone, which is like a horror game, which is like really cool.
Yes.
Dialect is awesome. Anyways, there's a bunch of like um, games that really know what they are,
Mm-hmm.
that like know how to give you an experience and do it without a GM,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great. And it's kind of going back to that discussion about like how much scaffolding do you
Yes.
give, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put the right scaffolding, and you get a good experience out of it every time.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Um, but like I'm with a D&D group that's been playing together for 5 years. Would I want to give that up? No, like I love that too.
Yeah.
And I love the experiences that I've been able to have
Mm-hmm.
GMing. I love other folks in my group that have like GM'd for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I like them both.
No, I that is I love that your question is like I like GMless games, but I also like them both. But I think that's fair. I also like both. Because you've taken the position of a no GM, I don't personally have like a huge preference for either or. My vanilla perspective and very lawyerly response, sue me, I'm a lawyer, is it depends. If a game is able to stand on its own as a GMless game, that is the experience you sign for. That then I'm gonna have fun playing that experience. If it's gonna be a GM game and it's a well GM game with all the fun and excitement that I like, then I'm gonna have fun in it as well. But I will kind of like advocate for the other half, since you advocate for the GM-less side of it, where I love GM games because I love seeing different GMs and seeing how like one game like D&D or Pathfinder, Quest, etc., can look like in different folks' hands, and how
Mm.
different folks are able to like draw out different aspects of the gameplay and of the rules than one particular person. So, for example, as some folks might know, in Power Transpainer RPG, we just wrapped Arc 1 of Chaos Protocol. We're now in Arc 2. We played the Wild Sea RPG in Arc 1. And experiencing
Mm.
Connie GMing it was an incredible experience. Love Connie, fantastic GM. And then I ran Wild Sea. for a bunch of folks at home. And even then, I could see, upon reflection, that Connie and I were paying attention to different aspects of the gameplay loop than the other did, and probably put forward a different experience for players than each other, right? And I think that's part of the magic of having a GM, and also to have someone to scheme with in DMs over the trauma you want to have inflicted upon your little Blorbo. That's also very fun to have a GM for. Amazing. It doesn't seem like we have any other questions. That's a-okay, folks. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, I think we can begin to wrap things up. First of all, thank you, Lila, for being here and for joining me on Designer Spotlight. Could you want to give yourself an outro? It is my pleasure. It's been such a joy chatting with you. I'm so excited about this game. Congratulations again. Why don't you introduce yourself once more? Let folks know how they could support you, where to find you, all that jazz, and how they can support you further.
Sounds good. As far as how you can support me, it is the Jukebox Kickstarter. I love this game, if that's not clear from the fact that I've been talking about it for like 2 hours. You should definitely check it out. It's on Kickstarter right now. I think at this particular moment, that is the thing that I would like, people to go towards. But if you are looking for me elsewhere, I am Cerulean Otter on Twitter/X. I am Lila on Blue Sky, and I also write about game design and project management over on my blog with Jar of Eyes on Substack. So that's where you can find me.
That is amazing. Please go and check her out on all of those platforms. And please go and support Jukebox. I believe you have like over 20 some days left in the Kickstarter. I forgot the exact number, but there's still plenty of time. Let's raise more money for Jukebox. Let's get it out there, and let's break some goals, everybody. It's a really, really cool game, and I'm very, very excited to see it out in the world. Amazing. I thank you all so much for joining us for Designer Spotlight. If you are a game designer or Ttrpg font of knowledge or artist or layout designer, I want to talk to you. And if you are interested in talking with me, please consider joining me on game design and filling out that Google form and registering your interest to come and chat with me here. We're about to do a brand update to Designer Spotlight. We are going to do a full rebrand with a brand new name and brand new look. And that will encompass all of the trajectories that the TTRPG scene has to offer. So please keep your eyes peeled for the announcements on that. Tomorrow, if you want to find me, tomorrow, Transparent RPG is going live with Arc 2 of the Chaos Protocol, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, if you're interested. We're about to dive into the City of Heaven in our Ciencia setting of this particular arc, and we'll be playing City of Mist. So if you want to see us bring the drama, please come and see us on Chaos Protocol tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. And finally, I will promote the fact that I am working on my first TTRPG, a narrative-first action RPG, which is an 80s, 90s grunge fighting game where you play werewolves. You can pre-order on my itch.io store now. And the Quick Start Guide will be releasing in February. We're working really hard to get that out to you all. And there's some other cool updates that I'll tell you all hopefully soon once promos are out and done for it. And with that, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Valiant Doran. You can find me all on the internet at Valiant Doran or at Otso SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure hunt to set you on. But before you touch that dial, we will be raiding somebody fantastic, no doubt. So I'm going to go and begin the raid over there. Thank you all for being here. And with that, have a great rest of your evening as we prepare ourselves for a raid. Amazing. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.